Welcome back to the Right on Crime podcast. I'm Marilyn Davidson, State Director for Oklahoma, and today I'm really excited because we have Nikki Pressley, who is our State Director for Texas, and also we have a special guest in Justin Keener, who is President of Americans for Public Safety. So thank you guys for coming and coming to talk to me about pretrial release and some of the things that are going on in our states that we work on with Right on Crime, but also across the country, which is a kind of a unique perspective that, Justin, you have with the organization that you're working with. So I want to start with Americans for Public Safety. If you want to give just a little rundown of what you guys are doing, and then maybe some of the things that you guys are seeing with the pretrial and some of the issues it's causing in our states.
Thanks, Marilyn. Really appreciate the invitation to be here. So Americans for Public Safety was launched in 2025 with the goal of electing candidates and passing public policy that provides greater public safety for our communities. And we will do that in any state we need to, whether we're going to counter Soros DAs or there's great policy in Congress that we need to pursue. But we look at it really through one lens. Is it providing justice to victims? Is it respecting law enforcement? And does it follow the Constitution? And if you're a candidate that meets those criteria, we'd be glad to support you. Likewise, if it's a piece of legislation, that's the lens we'll look through. Now, on pretrial, you mentioned, this is something that communities across the country are having to deal with because we have rogue judges and rogue prosecutors who are releasing incredibly dangerous offenders onto the streets while they're awaiting trial, even though they've been previously convicted of violent crimes. And so something needs to be done across the country. Thankfully, Texas, largely because of a lot of work that Nikki supported, Texas passed what might be a model policy that not only ensures we can lock up the most dangerous offenders, but there's also accountability for these judges as well.
Great. And you mentioned Nikki in Texas. Last year, you guys did a lot of work along with the help of Governor Abbott and his support in kind of modifying how Texas looks at pretrial release. Can you tell us what was done, how it's changed, the challenges?
Yeah, of course. So I began working on bail and pretrial issues in 2020 with Justin, and we had been working on it ever since. Basically, in Texas, the Constitution said that you could not deny bail for anything except for capital murder or if you had 3 prior felony convictions and then a few family violence instances. And so if a judge had a murder case, a murder defendant, they could not deny them bail. They were basically just left having to guess how high was high enough to either detain someone pre-trial and then also the conditions that were needed. But even if they believed that they were a threat to public safety, then they were required to provide them with some type of bail. And so we needed to change the Constitution to expand that list of offenses for which someone could be denied. And finally, last session we got it done and we expanded it to about 9 offenses, I believe, like murder and aggravated sexual assault, and that was largely because of Governor Abbott's work and leadership on the issue. It was a priority and emergency item for him, but since it was an amendment, we had to get bipartisan support, so it took a lot of collaboration between both parties, and we finally got there and the voters affirmed it in the fall. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it works in practice. We also added some judicial accountability, like Justin mentioned. It's basically if a judge does not deny for one of the offenses that they can deny for and should be denying for, they have to provide a written finding of why they did not deny so that there's some sort of accountability and they need to explain themselves as to why they did not deny someone pretrial release and why they think that they are not a threat to public safety.
And I just want to kind of get your different perspectives as well on the issue. A lot of times we hear that the solutions that we bring forth regarding any kind of pretrial release, pretrial programs, that we're always like a solution looking for a problem. And sometimes it's really hard to like pin down and to really show that there is a problem. Talk to me about maybe some of the things that you're seeing in the other states, if you have any data or just, stories that are showing like here's the proof, here's the evidence of where this is a problem and it does need a more conservative, we would say, right on crime solution to handle it.
So I'm going to give a couple examples. We're seeing many across the country of why reform is needed and why we need to put safeguards in place to protect the public. One of the greatest examples is here in Texas, in Houston, a woman named Rosalie Cook. She was murdered by an individual who had been released on bond, even though he had been arrested 67 times for violent offenses before. that is the type of thing that you look at and you know that person should have been kept behind bars while awaiting trial. We have the very well-known case of the Ukrainian refugee who was in North Carolina, and she was murdered on transit and by an individual who also had faced multiple violent offenses and should have been kept behind bars. And so you're seeing examples like this. I was talking to the sheriff in Oklahoma County up in your area. He's in Oklahoma City, and he was telling me he faces this issue with the judges that he has to work with and how they are releasing individuals who should be kept behind bars. When you have cases like this and you have individuals who are judges who are abandoning the need to consider public safety, and instead they're playing these social justice games with the communities at risk, that's when you need to step in. And thankfully we've seen the families of crime victims stepping up as well. In Texas, they formed a coalition. They said enough is enough, and it was a bipartisan coalition of families who said we're tired of seeing so many people murdered, raped, and put in harm's way. And they're the ones who really brought attention to this, and you're starting to see that across the country. So yes, there are several examples. The good thing is we now have people who are rising up saying enough is enough, and we're providing solutions to fix it.
And I think you made some really good points. And I think when you look at our side of the issue, when I say our, the right on crime side, Americans for Public Safety side, we really have the data backing us up. When I used to work in corrections, we would get attacked a lot because, we would release someone after they were done serving their sentence, and they would go on and commit another crime. And they would attack us like, why would you let this horrible person out? Well, one, legally, you can't hold them past their date of release, but also there is no crystal ball that we can look at someone and say, yeah, you stole a car, and then next week you're going to go out and commit a violent murder. The good thing is, when it comes to pretrial, we actually do have some tools that are out there that are science-based that can help us really look at risk and do better about of not putting the public at greater risk of being further victimized. And that's something we're looking at in Oklahoma, is implementing those risk-based assessments. So when someone's released, it's not based on, I've heard before, what kind of mood the judge is in. One day they might let everyone out, and the next day they might not. But it's actually based on a scientific data. There was a news story in Tulsa, getting back to the people saying, well, is this really an issue? Is this really something that's going on, or is it just, media talking points? There was a news station in Tulsa that looked at data for people that were arrested on first-degree murder complaints and how many of them were getting bail. In 2018, only 7% of first-degree murder complaints, they were given bail. Fast forward 2023, 82% were released on bail. That's a clear indicator there's something going on. You don't even have to look at did crime increase, did that increase? It's just an indicator that there's something going on with the judges that's not science-based. So, Nikki, in Texas, was there that sort of, did you get that pushback from lawmakers sometimes, is this really a problem? Or was there that sort of incident or something that happened that clicked to tell people this is something we really need to address?
We did, and it's really difficult to kind of track that kind of thing in Texas because at the beginning we didn't have the data, right? And so in 2021 we passed the Damon-Allen Act, which was very comprehensive. Prior to that, the judges weren't even required to review criminal history whenever setting bail. So it requires them to look at the criminal history. They have a summarized version of that includes everything that a validated objective risk assessment would. It just doesn't have the score and output that a risk assessment does. But we also require them to fill out a bail form for every single person that they're bonding out, and that gets sent to our Office of Court Administration, and then it's posted publicly. And you can kind of toggle through different judges or counties, that type of thing, to see what bonds are being posted for what offenses, and also looking at their criminal history. So that's really helpful. But we definitely did have the pushback of these might be one-off stories, but I think we all know that that's not true. And I did want to also talk about the risk assessment from the opposite end of the spectrum, right? There's low, medium, and high risk people. So it's really helpful for understanding when to detain someone and when someone might go out and commit another crime and they're a risk to public safety. But it's also really helpful for people who might be arrested for a first-time nonviolent offense, and then they're a low-risk person and can be safely released, maybe on a personal bond with the correct conditions. So having that risk assessment is super, super valuable to a judge, and it really moves us closer towards a risk-based system that is better for public safety and better for our communities.
Yeah, I feel like in most states, decisions, especially policy decisions, are made based on emotion. And this is a really good opportunity for us to take the emotion out of that decision-making process and make it more scientific. Now, there is, I am a firm believer of innocent till proven guilty. So how do we balance the public safety versus an individual's, personal rights to, be treated like they're innocent until proven guilty?
Sure,
none of us are lawyers, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing's clear. Bail is in the U.S. Constitution, so it's been envisioned. I think the aspect that needs to be considered is every case is considered individually, and where you get into trouble is if you have, for instance, these bail schedules that just blanket say for this crime it's this amount of bail, and you don't consider things such as their prior criminal history, ties to the community. There's so many other factors at play, and we need, in order to make sure that constitutionality threshold is met, is that you make sure you're taking all that into account and you're not just either denying someone bail or giving them bail on something other than the totality of the situation. And that's why this move towards risk, not just risk to public safety, but risk of flight, is so critical. And we need to start looking at it through that lens, and you'll see that courts are more favorably disposed towards risk assessments in terms of their constitutionality than bail schedules. And it's important that we have that scale too, because I don't think any of us are here arguing that someone who is going to court for some low-level nonviolent offense, and mother of 5, needs to be sitting in prison, jail, while awaiting trial. I don't know anyone who argues that. And so risk takes that into consideration, while on the other end, let's take the case of Khalid Jabbar, senseless death in Tulsa. The judge, despite the prosecutor begging the judge to not release this individual, lengthy criminal history, did. The person went and killed Khalid, and then it turned into such a controversy, the judge even had to recuse themselves because of accusations of bias. If there were some type of risk assessment or public safety report, and that's documented, the judge would then be on the record saying, here's exactly why I made this decision, and here are the factors that are at play. So that's why moving towards risk, I think, helps address that constitutional question.
And I'll add to that as well. I mean, you do have the right to be innocent until proven guilty, but the Supreme Court has also said, you don't have the right to bail if you're a threat to public safety or a risk of flight. And so I think that's something to consider. But also, when you're changing the law to detain more people, it's very nuanced, right? So in Texas, we're requiring counsel at that detention hearing. So there are some protections in place for the defendant. And so it's about balancing that. And it's very nuanced as far as the actual nitty-gritty policy goes. Yeah.
And the judges I've talked to about using some sort of either it's assessment or public safety report, they like it because it gives them a little bit of cover, because not everyone's in that obvious little box of where you can put them. There are some people that are kind of there in the gray area, and if they choose to release them or choose to hold them, they can look at that assessment or look at that report and say, this is why, because this report told me this. And we're not saying this is the only thing you have to use when you make that decision. It's just a tool we're asking them to consider, and they like that. They like kind of having that a little bit of backing to kind of justify some of the things that they do. We're talking about bail and release, and some of these decisions also will be made to send them to alternative programming or deferred sentencing. What are your kind of thoughts on that? Do you think that that's something that could greatly improve public safety? Good, bad, ugly?
I think diversion is a great thing when it's appropriate and safe for the person to be in the community. Maybe first-time nonviolent offenses, or using a specialty court that specializes in whatever issues they may be dealing with, whether it's substance abuse or maybe they're a retired veteran who is struggling with their mental health and they ended up committing a crime, even if it is maybe an assault or something like that. If we can get them into a specialized program that really focuses on their individual needs and gets them the help that they need, then I think diversion is very healthy. But I also understand that not everyone is right for that, right?
Yeah.
Like not everyone can be in the community and continue to not commit further crimes.
Yeah. I was in West Virginia a few weeks ago and met with several lawmakers, and they were talking about this exact issue. They were all Republicans, all I'd say, right of center, that's for certain. But they were talking about the scourge of fentanyl and drugs in their state and what can be done and how can we intervene in these individuals' lives, especially if it's right at the beginning, like their first criminal interaction. And so there are many Republicans across the country talking, and in fact, that's an issue that comes up in almost every state I go to. And whether I'm talking to law enforcement, victims advocates, or others, they recognize there's a moment where we can start intervening. The problem is when you get into when the left, I'll just say it, loses their minds and thinks that we can play social justice games with individuals who have a repeated violent offenses on their record. And so let's treat them with kid gloves. Let's blame society instead of looking at personal responsibility. And so that's the difference here is when we can intervene early enough where the situation allows it, where we have data that shows it leads to public safety, but it's also respecting law enforcement who put their lives at risk to arrest this individual. And if you're just going to release them on the street again, that's very disrespectful to the cops to say, hey, you're going to have to go chase this guy down again. So I think it's a great balance that needs to be looked at, especially for veterans courts. Drugs are another one. And so if we can do that and find that balance, it's good. I just think you have many communities that go too far each side, and we need to find what is that good balance for public safety in the middle.
Yeah, and you talked about law enforcement. You talk to anyone in law enforcement, they will all tell you that they have that one or two people that are out on the streets or that they arrest, that they just know them. Like they know them by name, they know their family, they know where they live, they know where they work. And I just think about how frustrating that has to be to continuously having to go arrest someone and then seeing nothing happening to them. Either they aren't being held when they should, or they're not being offered treatment, or they're just refusing to change. So you're right. We do need to think of law enforcement more when we make those decisions. But I think with pretrial, though, it's just such a great opportunity, especially as conservatives, for us to make a change regarding our correction system and the people that are going into it, and to trying to kind of make sure the most appropriate people are being used for those beds. So is there anything else you guys want to add that you've seen that you're thinking about that's related to?
I think this is a great opportunity to include accountability measures. When Nikki might have heard the same. When you travel around the country and you meet with lawmakers in different states, they talk about very clearly, do we grant bail, do we deny bail? But then they don't take that extra step. How do you make sure that the judge's decision is recorded and you can see how the decision was made? Is there an opportunity? Say you have a judge who just refuses to hold violent offenders accountable. Can you appeal the judge's bail decision if you're a prosecutor who, like the case in Tulsa, you're pleading with the judge and you have a clear demonstrated record of this defendant who has a violent past? Can the decision be appealed? So I encourage lawmakers to go a step further and think of it as how can we improve the entire pretrial system so that there's not just constitutional questions addressed, but it's very transparent and there's accountability in there, especially for those prosecutors and judges who just seem to play social justice games, is all I can call them, with public safety.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And that's what Texas just did, is allowing prosecutors to appeal a bond decision for only those offenses that you can be denied bail. And then that person is held pretrial while the appeal is going through. We have an expedited process. I believe it's 20 days tops for the appeal. But those are things that other states should look at too. Maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe it's even more expedited, but definitely something to look at. And even the small things, like I was talking about the bail forms, where you have to fill out a form and actually send it to OCA, and then it's public information and public data where anybody can go look and see what each judge is doing. So even small little things like that add an extra layer of accountability and transparency.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm hearing is there's just way too many activist judges and DAs and things that are out there, especially I feel like in the states where the laws are a little bit more conservative and they are trying to, I guess, affect policy through those positions. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Nikki, for coming today, and Justin for joining us here on our podcast. If people want to keep up with what you guys are doing around the country, where can they find out more information?
Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me on here. This is a great issue that I hope legislators across the country start addressing more thoroughly. You can find more out about Americans for Public Safety at our website, a4publicsafety.com. That's a4publicsafety.com.
Perfect. When I'm looking forward to working with you guys, not just in Oklahoma, but hopefully seeing what you guys do with us in other states too. So it'll be fun. Thank you guys for joining us today on the Right of Crime podcast. If you want to hear more about the policy issues we're working on, you can go to rightoncrime.com.